started with a phone call. Not hers, mine. At 11:23 p.m. on a Wednesday. I was in bed, half asleep, when my phone lit up on the nightstand. It wasn't a number I recognized, but something made me pick up. Maybe it was the adrenaline jolt you get from unexpected calls that late. Or maybe it was the fact that Jessica wasn't in bed yet, and my mind was already restless. "Hello," I muttered, trying to keep my voice low. The line crackled for a second before a deep male voice answered. "Is this Mark? Who's asking?" My tone sharpened instantly. "Listen, I don't want to start anything, but you need to know something about your wife." My stomach dropped. There was no small talk, no preamble. Just a blunt, jagged statement that cut through the quiet of the room like a blade. "Who the hell is this?" I demanded, sitting up now, my heart pounding in my chest. "I'm Ryan," the man said. His voice wasn't apologetic. It was steady, almost cold. "I think you've heard of me." And just like that, a name I'd barely noticed before, Ryan, hit me like a ton of bricks.
Jessica's text.
The guarded way she'd snatched her phone last week. "What are you talking about?" I growled, though my voice betrayed my growing panic. "She's been seeing me," Ryan said flatly, "for a few months now. I didn't realize she was married at first. When I found out, I told her to end it, but..." He trailed off as if the rest didn't need to be said. I felt like the air had been sucked out of the room. My grip on the phone tightened until my knuckles turned white. "You're lying," I said, though the words came out weaker than I wanted them to. "I can send you proof," Ryan replied without hesitation. "Text messages, photos, whatever you need to believe me. But before you hate me, you should know. She lied to me too." I didn't answer. My mind was spinning. My body was frozen. "I'll text you what I have," Ryan said after a pause. "You deserve to know." Then he hung up. For a moment, I just sat there, the silence in the room louder than it should have been. Then my phone buzzed again. A series of messages. I didn't want to look. Every fiber of my being screamed to throw the phone across the room and pretend the call had never happened. But I opened the messages anyway. The first one was a screenshot of a conversation between Jessica and Ryan. Her name, her picture, it was unmistakable. "Jessica, I'll make something up. He won't suspect a thing." "Ryan, you sure?"
Jessica, trust me, babe.
"He's clueless." My heart shattered. The next picture hit harder. It was the two of them at what looked like a hotel bar. Her hand rested casually on his knee, her smile wide and unbothered. She was wearing the black dress I bought her for our anniversary last year. I wanted to scream, but instead, I sat there, staring at the evidence in front of me. My wife wasn't just lying to me. She was doing it with such confidence, such ease. It made me question everything. And then, almost on cue, I heard the front door open downstairs. Jessica was home. The sound of Jessica's heels clicking against the hardwood floor snapped me out of my daze. It wasn't just the rhythm of her steps. It was the way they echoed in the silence, like the ticking of a bomb about to go off. I stuffed my phone under the pillow and got out of bed, every nerve in my body on high alert. When I stepped into the hallway, I could see her at the bottom of the stairs. She had her phone in one hand and her purse slung over her shoulder, still in that same black dress from the photo Ryan had just sent me. Her hair was slightly mussed, and her lipstick was smudged at the corners. She looked startled when she saw me. "Oh, you're still awake," she said, her tone too casual. She started up the stairs, brushing past me with a quick peck on the cheek. "Long day. I'm beat. Let's talk in the morning. Okay?" I caught a faint whiff of cologne, one that wasn't mine. "Jessica," I said, my voice low but firm. "Stop." She froze mid-step, her hand tightening on the banister. Slowly, she turned to face me, a flicker of something unreadable in her eyes. "What's wrong?" she asked, her voice laced with that practiced sweetness that used to disarm me. "Not tonight." I pulled my phone from behind my back and held it up, the glow from the screen illuminating her face. "You want to tell me who Ryan is?" Her expression flickered for a fraction of a second. Panic, shock, then calm, like she was flipping through channels until she found the one she wanted. "Ryan?" she repeated, furrowing her brow. "Oh, come on, Mark. Don't tell me you're snooping through my phone now." The audacity of her deflection lit a fire in me. I stepped closer, holding up the text messages. He called me. He sent me this. Don't you dare play dumb. Jessica's eyes darted to the screen, and I saw the exact moment her mask cracked. But instead of apologizing or even looking ashamed, she smirked. Wow, she said, crossing her arms. So you're taking the word of some random guy over me? Classy, Mark. My hands were trembling, but I kept my voice steady. Cut the crap, Jess. He didn't just tell me, he showed me. The texts, the photos. You've been lying to me for months. How long were you planning to keep this up? She rolled her eyes, like I was inconveniencing her. Look, it's not what you think, okay? Ryan and I... She hesitated, as if searching for the right words. It was just a distraction, that's all. You've been so distant lately, and I... Don't you dare blame this on me. I snapped, my voice rising. Oh, come on. She shot back, her tone sharp now. Don't act like you've been some perfect husband. You think I don't notice how you come home and bury yourself in your stupid work? How you barely even look at me anymore? My chest tightened. So your solution was to sleep with someone else? I said it wasn't like that. She hissed, her voice dripping with irritation. You're blowing this way out of proportion. My hands clenched into fists. Out of proportion? You've been sneaking around behind my back, and you want to act like I'm the bad guy here. She threw up her hands, exasperated. Fine, Mark. You want the truth? Yes, I've been seeing Ryan. And guess what? At least he knows how to make me feel wanted. That was it. The words hit me like a punch to the gut, knocking the air out of my lungs. My mouth went dry, but I forced myself to keep eye contact. So that's it, I said quietly, my voice trembling. You're not even sorry? Jessica shrugged, her face cold, unfeeling. I'm sorry you found out this way. But no, Mark, I'm not sorry. Maybe if you'd actually paid attention to me, we wouldn't be here. Her words were venomous, meant to sting, and they did. I felt like the floor was crumbling beneath me, but I couldn't let her see me break. Unbelievable, I muttered, stepping back. My voice was raw now, a mix of rage and heartbreak. You're actually trying to justify this. I'm just being honest, she said, her tone almost smug. Something you clearly can't handle. I stared at her, a million thoughts racing through my mind, but one stood out above the rest. I couldn't let this end here. Not like this. Without saying another word, I turned and walked back to the bedroom, slamming the door behind me. She didn't follow. I didn't expect her to. Instead, I grabbed my phone and started typing a message. If Jessica wanted to destroy everything we'd built, fine. But I wasn't going to let her walk away unscathed. I sent a cruel message to my cheating wife while she was at dinner with her lover. They were shocked. I stared at the screen, my finger hovering over the send button. This was just the beginning. The message wasn't planned. It wasn't calculated. It was raw, fueled by a toxic cocktail of rage, heartbreak, and the sick need to watch her facade crumble. I typed it out in one long breath, barely pausing to think. Jessica, since you seem to think I'm clueless, let me clarify. I know everything.
Ryan told me.
He sent me proof. The texts, the photos, you playing dress up for your boyfriend in the same clothes I bought you. You're disgusting. You're a liar. And you've been caught. But I wasn't done. My thumb hovered over the keyboard, trembling, as I added the final blow. Also, tell Ryan I hope the dinner was worth it. You've ruined everything for a guy who doesn't even respect you enough to keep quiet. Enjoy what's left of your little secret. I hit send before I could second-guess myself, imagining her phone lighting up downstairs. She was probably still in the kitchen, pouring herself a glass of wine, thinking she just skated through another night without consequence. The silence in the house was suffocating. I paced the room like a caged animal, waiting for her reaction. But instead of an outburst, I heard a muffled ding from her phone downstairs, and then another, and another. Jessica's heels clattered as she bolted up the stairs, phone in hand. She flung the bedroom door open with the force of a storm, her face a twisted mask of fury. What the hell is this, Mark? She spat, shoving her phone in my face. Are you out of your mind? Don't act surprised. I shot back. You knew this was coming the second Ryan called me. She glared at me, her chest rising and falling like she was about to explode. Do you have any idea what you've just done? Oh, I have every idea, I said, stepping forward. You're mad because I exposed your little affair, aren't you? What? Did you think you'd keep playing house with me while sneaking around with him? Jessica's lips twisted into a sneer. You think sending some petty message makes you the victim here? Grow up, Mark. You're pathetic. The venom in her words stunned me for a moment, but I refused to let her control the narrative. Pathetic? Pathetic is lying to your husband's face for months. Pathetic is dragging your marriage through the mud for some cheap thrill with a guy who doesn't even care about you enough to cover your tracks. Her eyes narrowed, and for the first time, I saw real panic flicker across her face. What did you say to him? Why? Afraid he won't want to make you feel wanted anymore. I snapped. Don't worry. I didn't need to tell him much. He seems to already know what kind of person you are. Jessica's jaw tightened, but she didn't answer. Instead, she started furiously texting on her phone, her fingers moving so fast it was almost comical. Trying to do damage control? I asked, leaning against the doorframe. Let me guess. You're telling him I'm crazy? That I hacked your phone? What's the lie this time, Jess? She threw her phone onto the bed and whirled on me. You've made this worse for both of you, Mark. You think Ryan's the problem? Fine, he's gone.
Ella en Italia.
Happy now. The way she said it, so cold, so transactional, sent a shiver down my spine. It's not about Ryan, I said, my voice cracking. It's about you, about how easily you threw everything away and can't even pretend to care. Care? She barked, throwing up her hands. Why should I care when all you ever do is make me feel like I'm invisible? That's your excuse? I shouted. I work my ass off for this family. I gave you everything. Yeah, well, maybe you should have given me more than a paycheck. She snapped back, her voice icy. You stopped seeing me as anything but your wife years ago, Mark. So don't act so high and mighty now. I stared at her, stunned. For all her deflections, for all her venom, this was the first time she'd admitted it. She didn't see me as her husband anymore. I wasn't a person to her, just an obstacle. She grabbed her phone again and stormed out of the room, slamming the door behind her. But this time I didn't chase her. I let her go. My heart was racing, my mind spinning. I thought the confrontation would make me feel better, like I'd finally gained the upper hand. But all it left me with was an empty ache in my chest. The woman I thought I knew was gone, replaced by someone I couldn't recognize. And I had no idea what came next. I didn't sleep that night. The house felt suffocating, each room filled with a tension so thick it felt alive. Jessica had retreated to the guest room after our fight, slamming the door hard enough to rattle the walls. I wasn't about to give her the satisfaction of checking on her. Instead, I stayed in our bedroom, phone in hand, scrolling through the messages Ryan had sent me earlier. I studied every word, every timestamp, trying to piece together the timeline of her betrayal. One text stood out from the rest, though, gnawing at me like a splinter. Ryan, she told me you two barely talk anymore, that you're more like roommates than anything else. Was that what she was telling him? That I was some inattentive husband who'd driven her into another man's arms? It made my blood boil. And yet, deep down, it planted a seed of doubt. Was that how she really saw me? Around 3 a.m., I heard the faint creak of the stairs. My first thought was that Jessica had come to apologize, to try and salvage the wreckage of our marriage. But when I cracked the bedroom door open, I saw her silhouette in the dim light of the kitchen. She wasn't coming to me. She was on her phone, pacing back and forth in front of the counter. Curiosity, or maybe masochism, got the better of me. I crept down the hallway, keeping my steps light, and strained to hear her voice. He's losing it, she was saying, her tone low and urgent. No, I don't think he'll do anything drastic, but he's definitely pissed. A pause. Whoever she was talking to must have asked a question, because she sighed and replied, No, he doesn't know about that. That? My chest tightened. What else was there? I edged closer, holding my breath as I crouched near the doorway. Her voice dropped to a near whisper. Look, I'll handle it. Just don't text me again until I say it's safe. Okay? He's watching everything now. She ended the call and set her phone down on the counter, staring at it for a long moment before turning to the fridge. I slipped back down the hallway and into the shadows, my mind racing. Who was she talking to? Ryan? Someone else? And what didn't I know about? When she finally came back upstairs and disappeared into the guest room, I grabbed my phone and opened Ryan's messages again. My fingers hovered over the keyboard as I debated whether to contact him. I hated the thought of reaching out to the man who'd helped destroy my marriage, but if Jessica was hiding something bigger, I needed to know. Me? There's more, isn't there? Tell me everything. The response came almost instantly. Ryan, what do you mean? Me? I heard her on the phone. She said I didn't know about that. What the hell is that? The typing bubbles appeared, then disappeared, then reappeared again. When the reply finally came through, it sent a chill down my spine. Ryan, I thought she told you. She's been seeing someone else too. I'm not the only one. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. My hands trembled as I stared at the screen, rereading the message over and over. Another man? Me? Who? Ryan's reply was almost apologetic. Ryan? I don't know his name. She mentioned him a couple of times. Said he's older. Married. She joked that he was low maintenance. I felt sick. The room seemed to tilt around me as the reality of Jessica's betrayal sank in deeper. This wasn't just an affair. It was a pattern. A calculated game she'd been playing right under my nose. The woman I thought I knew had burned our life to the ground, and she hadn't even stopped to look at the ashes. By the time the first rays of sunlight crept through the blinds, I knew one thing for sure. I couldn't stay passive anymore. If Jessica wanted to play games, I'd make damn sure she learned who she was dealing with. It was time to flip the script. The next morning, Jessica acted like nothing had happened. She came out of the guest room wearing her usual icy calm, sipping coffee like she hadn't ripped my life apart less than 12 hours ago. Morning, she said flatly, without even looking at me. I watched her as she moved around the kitchen, scrolling on her phone like it was just another day. She didn't even flinch when I slammed my mug onto the counter. Sleep well? I asked, my tone dripping with sarcasm. She glanced at me, her expression neutral. As well as I could, given the drama you caused last night. I laughed. A short, humorless sound. Drama I caused? That's rich. Coming from you. Jessica sighed like I was exhausting her. Mark, we've been over this. I told you I'll end things with Ryan. Let's just move on. Okay? Her dismissiveness ignited something in me. I leaned in, lowering my voice. Oh, we're moving on, all right? But not the way you think. Her eyes flickered with something. Fear, maybe, or just annoyance. What's that supposed to mean? I didn't answer. Instead, I grabbed my keys and left. I didn't have a plan yet, but I knew one thing. If Jessica thought she could control the narrative, she was dead wrong. She'd underestimated me, and that was her first mistake. The second mistake was leaving a trail. I spent the next few hours going through every piece of digital evidence I could find. Old messages, photos, receipts. Anything that might fill in the blanks of her deception. It didn't take long to piece together a timeline, and the picture that emerged was worse than I'd imagined. Jessica hadn't just been careless. She'd been reckless. There were messages from Ryan going back months, full of inside jokes and thinly veiled references to their meetings. But there were also gaps, conversations she'd clearly deleted. And then there were the emails. I almost missed them, buried under her work folder on our shared laptop. But there they were, exchanges with someone named Paul. Short, cryptic notes that didn't outright scream affair but hinted at something more. Jessica, let's meet at the usual spot. Same time as last week. Paul, looking forward to it. You're the highlight of my week. A sinking feeling settled in my gut. Ryan had been telling the truth. There was someone else. But who was Paul? I decided to find out. It didn't take much digging. A quick reverse search of his email address led me to his LinkedIn profile. And there he was, Paul Hamilton, Senior VP at a company Jessica's firm worked with. Married, 2 kids. Perfect. I stared at his picture for a long moment, my mind racing with possibilities. Jessica had no idea I knew about him, and that gave me the advantage. I could feel the pieces falling into place, the anger inside me sharpening into something colder, more focused. It was time to make my move. I started with Ryan. If he'd been blindsided by Jessica's lies, he might be willing to help. I sent him a quick message. Me. If you want to get back at her, I have a plan. Call me. He responded almost immediately. Ryan, what are you thinking? We spoke for 20 minutes, and by the end of the call I had everything I needed. Ryan wasn't just willing. He was eager to burn Jessica's carefully crafted world to the ground. Next, I drafted an email to Paul. Nothing too direct, just enough to let him know I wasn't bluffing. Subject, we need to talk. Body, Paul, I know about you and Jessica. I have proof. Meet me at Crescent Coffee on Friday at 10 a.m., or I'll be sharing what I know with your wife. I stared at the screen, my finger hovering over the send button. My heart was pounding, but I didn't hesitate. Send. This wasn't just about revenge anymore. It was about reclaiming control, about making Jessica face the consequences of her actions. She thought she could manipulate everyone around her, that she could walk away unscathed. But she was about to learn the hard way that actions have consequences. And I wasn't going to stop until she felt every single one. Friday couldn't come fast enough. I spent the next 2 days pretending everything was fine, acting like the confrontation with Jessica hadn't left me reeling. I could feel her watching me, trying to gauge my mood, but I gave her nothing. If she wanted to keep playing her games, she could. I was about to end them all. On Friday morning, I left the house early, telling Jessica I had a work meeting. She didn't even ask where or when, just muttered something non-committal while scrolling through her phone. I half expected her to call someone the moment I was out the door, but I didn't care. My focus was on Paul now. The coffee shop was quiet when I arrived, the hum of machines blending with soft jazz playing over the speakers. I chose a corner table, my back to the wall, and waited. At 9:57, he walked in. Paul was taller than I expected, with graying hair and the kind of confident stride you'd expect from someone who spends his life in boardrooms. He scanned the room, and the moment his eyes landed on me, I could see the unease settle in. He approached cautiously, holding a to-go cup he clearly didn't intend to drink. "Your mark?" he asked, his voice low. I nodded, gesturing for him to sit. He hesitated, then lowered himself into the chair across from me. "What is this about?" he asked, though the tension in his voice told me he already knew. I slid my phone across the table. The screen lit up with one of Jessica's emails. His eyes flicked to it, and his expression tightened. "Jessica," I said evenly. "My wife. You've been seeing her." Paul's jaw clenched. For a moment, he looked like he was about to deny it, but then he exhaled sharply and leaned back in his chair. "Look, I don't know what she's told you, but I don't care what she told you," I interrupted. "I care about the truth, and right now you're going to give it to me." Paul rubbed his temples, clearly weighing his options. Finally, he leaned forward, his voice dropping to a near whisper. "It's not what you think. It wasn't serious. Just casual." The word made my blood boil. "Casual?" I repeated, my voice laced with disgust. He looked away, as if he couldn't face me. "It's over now, all right? It ended weeks ago." "Funny," I said, leaning in, "because she was still emailing you last week. Want to try that again?" Paul's face paled, and for the first time, he looked genuinely panicked. "I didn't ask for this," he said quickly. "She came on to me. She made it clear from the start she wasn't looking for anything serious." His attempt to paint himself as the victim only fueled my anger. "She's married, Paul, and so are you. How the hell did you think this was going to end?" He started, then stopped. His hands curled into fists on the table. "I made a mistake, all right? But you have to understand. Jessica isn't who you think she is." That stopped me cold. "What the hell is that supposed to mean?" Paul hesitated, then lowered his voice even further. "She's manipulative. She knows exactly what to say to get what she wants. I'm not the only one, you know. Ryan, there are others." My stomach churned, but I forced myself to stay calm. "Others? How many?" "I don't know," Paul admitted, "but she bragged about it once. Said it was fun to see how far she could push people." The words hit me like a punch to the gut. Jessica wasn't just cheating. She was playing some kind of twisted game. I took a deep breath, forcing myself to focus. "You're going to tell your wife," I said, my voice cold and steady. Paul's eyes widened. What? No. You can't. Oh, I can. I cut him off. And I will if you don't. She deserves to know the truth just like I did. You have until tonight. He looked like he was about to argue, but something in my expression must have stopped him. He nodded reluctantly, his shoulders slumping in defeat. As he stood to leave, I added one final warning. If you try to spin this, or if you go near Jessica again, I'll make sure everyone knows exactly what you've been up to. Understand? Paul nodded again, then hurried out of the coffee shop without another word. I stayed behind, letting the adrenaline drain from my body as I stared at the empty chair across from me. For the first time in weeks, I felt like I had some semblance of control again. But this wasn't over. Jessica still had no idea what was coming, and I intended to keep it that way. If she wanted to play dirty, I could play dirtier. When I got home, the house was eerily quiet. Jessica wasn't in the kitchen or the living room. Her car was in the driveway, though, so I knew she was around. I went upstairs and found her sitting in the guest room, staring at her phone like she was waiting for something. Maybe someone. Busy day? I asked, leaning against the doorframe. She glanced up, her expression unreadable. What do you want, Mark? I stepped into the room, closing the door behind me. I want the truth, Jess. All of it. No more lies. Her mouth twitched, like she was fighting back a smirk. I already told you everything. You just can't handle it. Oh, you told me about Ryan, I said, my voice calm despite the storm brewing inside me. But you forgot to mention Paul. And the others. Her face froze, the color draining from her cheeks. For a moment, I thought she was going to deny it, but then she laughed. A short, bitter sound. Paul, huh? Guess he couldn't keep his mouth shut, she said, shaking her head. Neither could Ryan, I replied. Seems like you've been keeping yourself pretty busy. Jessica stood, folding her arms across her chest. What do you want me to say, Mark? That I'm sorry? That I regret it? Because I don't. Her words hit me like a slap, but I didn't flinch. You don't regret destroying our marriage? Marriage? She scoffed, taking a step closer. Let's not pretend we had some fairy tale romance. You've been checked out for years, Mark. You just didn't notice because you were too busy pretending everything was fine. Her deflection was almost laughable now. So that's your excuse? You didn't feel adored, so you decided to sleep with every guy who gave you attention. Call it whatever you want, she snapped. But at least they made me feel alive. I stared at her, the weight of her words settling in my chest like a stone. She wasn't just unapologetic. She was reveling in her betrayal, twisting the knife deeper with every sentence. You're unbelievable, I said quietly. You think you can just do whatever you want, and there won't be consequences. Her smirk returned, colder this time. What are you going to do, Mark? Cry to your friends? Hire a lawyer? Go ahead. But don't forget, you're no saint either. What the hell is that supposed to mean? I demanded. Jessica's eyes glinted with something almost predatory. You think I didn't notice how close you were getting to that assistant of yours? What was her name? Emily? My jaw tightened. Don't even try that. Emily and I never. Oh, please, she interrupted, rolling her eyes. You didn't have to. The way she looked at you was enough. But hey, maybe now you can give her a call. I'm sure she'd love to comfort you. Her words were meant to provoke me, but I refused to take the bait. You're deflecting, I said evenly. You know you're caught, and you can't stand it. Jessica tilted her head, her smirk widening. Maybe, or maybe I just don't care anymore. I took a step back, letting out a slow breath. You don't care now, I said. But you will. She frowned, the first crack in her armor. What's that supposed to mean? You'll find out soon enough, I said, turning and heading for the door. Mark, she started, but I didn't stop. I left the room, shutting the door behind me before she could say another word. As I walked downstairs, I pulled out my phone. Paul hadn't texted back yet, but Ryan had sent me a message a few hours earlier. Ryan, let me know if you need anything else. I'm in. I typed out a quick response. Me thanks. We'll talk soon. I wasn't done with Jessica, not by a long shot. She wanted to act like she was untouchable, like she could walk away from this unscathed. But she was wrong. I had a plan, and she wouldn't see it coming until it was too late. Jessica thought she'd won. That was clear from the smugness she carried as she walked around the house the next day, humming while she tidied up like nothing had happened. It was all an act, though. Her confidence wasn't because she felt untouchable. It was because she thought she still held all the cards. She was wrong. I spent the day working behind the scenes, pulling together the final pieces of my plan. First, I called Ryan. "Ready to follow through?" I asked as soon as he picked up. "Yeah," he said. His voice was tense, but there was a hint of determination in it too. "What do you need me to do?" I explained the plan in detail, laying out exactly what I needed from him. Ryan didn't hesitate. By the end of the call, we had a clear strategy. Next, I reached out to Paul's wife. It wasn't easy to find her contact information, but with a little digging, I managed to locate her on Facebook. Her profile was private, but her name was enough to cross-reference her with Paul's LinkedIn. That led me to her work email. I typed out a short, direct message. Subject: something you should know. Body: "Hi, I'm sorry to contact you like this, but I believe you need to know that your husband, Paul, has been having an affair with my wife, Jessica. I have proof and can send it to you if you'd like. Please let me know if you want to discuss this further." I stared at the screen for a long moment before hitting send. My hands were shaking, but not from nerves. It was anger. Anger at Jessica, at Paul, at the entire web of lies they'd spun while we remained in the dark. An hour later, she responded. "Please send me the proof." I didn't hesitate. I forwarded her the emails between Jessica and Paul, along with screenshots of the texts Ryan had sent me about the other men. By the time I was done, I felt a grim sense of satisfaction. Jessica's carefully constructed house of cards was about to collapse. But I wasn't done. The final step involved Jessica herself. She still didn't know I'd been digging deeper or that I'd reached out to Paul's wife. She was oblivious, floating through her day as if she were untouchable. That evening, I casually mentioned that we needed to talk. "About what?" she asked, barely looking up from her phone. "Us," I said. "Everything." Jessica raised an eyebrow, her smirk returning. "What's there to talk about, Mark? I already told you I'm done with Ryan. Isn't that what you wanted?" "You think this is just about Ryan?" I asked, my voice calm. "You really don't get it, do you?" She leaned back in her chair, crossing her arms. "Okay, enlighten me." I pulled out my phone and placed it on the table between us. "Let me show you something." Her eyes flicked to the screen, and for the first time, I saw a flicker of uncertainty. "What is this?" she asked, her tone sharper now. "This," I said, pulling up the messages and emails, "is the truth. About Ryan. About Paul. About all the other men you've been lying to me about." Jessica's face went pale, but she quickly masked it with a scoff. "You've been snooping through my stuff again?" "Don't deflect," I said, my voice steel. "You've been lying to me, to Paul's wife, to everyone. And now, they're all going to know the truth." Her smirk faltered. "What did you do, Mark?" "I reached out to her," I said, leaning in. "Paul's wife. She knows everything now. And she's not happy." Jessica shot to her feet, panic flashing across her face. "You had no right." "I had every right," I snapped, cutting her off. "You dragged me into this mess. You betrayed me. And now you're going to face the consequences." For the first time, Jessica was speechless. Her confidence had crumbled, replaced by fear and anger. "You don't know what you've done," she said, her voice trembling. "You've ruined everything." "No, Jessica," I said, standing. "You ruined everything. I'm just making sure everyone sees it." As I walked out of the room, I could feel her eyes on me, burning with fury. But I didn't care. The trap was set, and now all I had to do was wait. Jessica stayed holed up in the guest room that night, pacing and muttering under her breath. I could hear the frantic buzz of her phone, her panicked voice cutting through the walls. She was trying to control the damage, but it was too late. By morning, the fallout had begun. The first text came from Ryan. "Ryan, Paul's wife is furious. She just called him out in front of his whole office." I smirked at the message. Paul deserved every ounce of humiliation. If he thought he could sneak around with my wife and escape unscathed, he was sorely mistaken. Not long after, another message popped up, this time from Paul's wife. Thank you for telling me. He admitted everything. I've already contacted a lawyer. Good. That was one less liar skating through life unchecked. But the real fireworks started mid-morning. I was in the kitchen, drinking coffee and scrolling through emails when Jessica came storming downstairs, her phone clutched in her hand like a weapon. "What the hell did you do, Mark?" she shouted, her voice trembling with rage. I didn't even look up. What I had to. She slammed her phone onto the table, her face twisted with fury. "Paul's wife just called me. She knows everything. She's threatening to tell my boss. Do you have any idea what that could do to my career?" I met her gaze, unfazed by her outburst. "You should have thought about that before you slept with your coworkers." Her hands curled into fists, her eyes blazing. "You had no right to go behind my back like this." I stood, setting my coffee cup down with deliberate calm. "Behind your back? That's rich, coming from you. You've been lying to me, cheating on me, and humiliating me for months. Did you think I'd just sit here and take it?" Jessica took a step closer, her voice dropping to a venomous whisper. "You don't get it, Mark. You think you've won, but you haven't. You're just as guilty as I am." I raised an eyebrow. Guilty of what? Being faithful? Being the one who tried to hold this marriage together while you tore it apart? "No," she snapped. "Guilty of being a coward. Instead of facing me, you ran to everyone else, airing our dirty laundry like a vindictive child." Her words stung, but I refused to let her twist this around. "Don't mistake my actions for cowardice," I said coldly. "This isn't about revenge. It's about justice. And if you don't like how it feels, maybe you should have thought twice before betraying everyone who trusted you." Jessica stared at me, her breathing uneven, her hands trembling at her sides. For a moment, I thought she might break down, but then she straightened, her expression hardening. "You think you're so righteous," she said, her voice low. "But you're not. You're just as broken as I am, Mark. And you always have been." Her words landed like punches, but I refused to let them faze me. "Maybe I am," I said, "but at least I don't drag everyone else down with me." She grabbed her phone and stormed out of the kitchen, slamming the front door behind her as she left the house. For the first time in weeks, I felt a sense of peace settle over me. The lies were unraveling, the masks were coming off, and Jessica was finally being forced to face the mess she'd created. But deep down, I knew this wasn't over. Jessica wasn't the type to walk away quietly. She'd try to claw her way out of this, and when she did, I'd be ready. This was war, and I wasn't backing down. Jessica didn't come home that night. The empty driveway and the silence in the house were like a physical weight pressing down on me. I wasn't surprised. If I were her, I'd want to disappear too. But Jessica wasn't one to accept defeat. She wouldn't vanish without trying to twist the situation in her favor. I knew her well enough to anticipate her next move. Around midnight, my phone buzzed. It was Ryan. "Ryan, she's at his place. Paul's. She's been there for hours." I felt a surge of anger, but it wasn't unexpected. Jessica was predictable in her own toxic way. She was running to Paul, likely hoping he'd help her clean up the mess or, at the very least, give her a place to hide. But the thing about people like Jessica is they don't realize when the game is already over. The next morning, I woke to another message, this time from Paul's wife. Her. "I just thought you should know. Jessica showed up here last night trying to talk to Paul. I told her to leave, but she wouldn't. It got heated." Me heated how? Her response was immediate. Her. She accused me of ruining her life and started screaming in our driveway. The neighbors called the cops. She's lucky they didn't arrest her. I couldn't help but laugh bitterly. Jessica's mask was slipping faster than I'd expected. The cool, calculating woman who thought she could control everything was unraveling, and everyone was seeing her for who she really was. Later that day, Jessica finally came home. She walked through the door with a strange mix of defiance and desperation in her eyes, her phone clutched tightly in her hand. "Nice of you to come back," I said, not bothering to hide my sarcasm. She ignored me, setting her phone on the counter and pouring herself a glass of water. I watched her every move, waiting for the inevitable explosion. It didn't take long. "You've ruined my life," she said suddenly, her voice shaking with anger. I leaned against the doorway, crossing my arms. "No, Jess, You ruined your life. I just made sure everyone knew the truth. She turned to face me, her eyes blazing. You had no right to drag other people into this. You dragged them in the moment you started lying to all of us. I shot back. Ryan, Paul, we didn't ask for this. You made the choice to betray us. Now you're dealing with the consequences. Her hands clenched into fists. You think you're so righteous, don't you? Like you're the victim in all of this. I am the victim, I said, my voice rising. But I'm not just sitting here letting you destroy me anymore. You lied to me, Jess. You destroyed everything we built. And now you want to act like you're the one who's been wronged? Give me a break. She laughed. A bitter, hollow sound. You think you're so clever, Mark. But you're just as weak as I always knew you were. Her words hit like a slap, but I didn't let them show. Keep telling yourself that, I said calmly. See where it gets you. Jessica took a step closer, her voice dropping to a venomous whisper. You think this is over? It's not. I'll make sure you regret this. Every single thing. I stared her down, refusing to back away. Go ahead and try, I said. But you'll be fighting on your own. Because no one's on your side anymore, Jessica. Not Ryan. Not Paul. Not me. You burned every bridge you had. And now you're standing in the ashes. For the first time, her bravado cracked. Her lip trembled, and I saw a flicker of something. Fear? Maybe, or realization. But just as quickly, she masked it with anger. You're going to regret this, she hissed before storming out of the kitchen. I let her go, the sound of her retreating footsteps echoing through the house. As much as her words stung, I knew they were hollow. Jessica could try all she wanted to claw her way back, but the walls were closing in on her, and this time there was no escape. For once, I was the one holding the cards. Jessica didn't retreat quietly. By the next morning, her resolve to lash out had grown sharper, more dangerous. I woke to a series of missed calls and messages from mutual friends, people I hadn't spoken to in weeks, now suddenly rushing to fill my inbox. Mark, what's going on? Jessica's saying you've gone off the rails. Hey man, Jess called me crying last night, said you're spreading lies about her. Is everything okay? She told me you're trying to ruin her career? What's going on? I felt my blood boil as I read each message. Jessica was doing what she did best. Playing the victim, twisting the narrative to make herself look like the wrong party. It was infuriating, but it also told me something important. She was losing control. I responded to a few of the messages, keeping my replies calm and factual. I'm not spreading lies. Jessica has been unfaithful for months. I have proof if you need it, but I'd prefer to keep this private. The responses varied, some shocked, some hesitant, others simply apologetic. It was clear Jessica's campaign to smear me wasn't landing as well as she'd hoped. Then came the real kicker, an email from her lawyer. Subject: cease and desist. Body: Dear Mark, my client Jessica requests that you immediately cease all communication with her acquaintances and colleagues regarding personal matters. Failure to comply may result in legal action. I read the email twice, the absurdity of it sinking in. She was threatening me now? After everything she'd done? I forwarded the email to my own lawyer, adding a simple note. She's trying to silence me. Let's discuss. Then I texted Jessica directly. Got your lawyer's email. Nice try. But you don't get to hide behind legal threats when you're the one who burned this marriage to the ground. She responded almost immediately. Jessica, I told you to stop. You're dragging my name through the mud for no reason. This is harassment, Mark. No, Jess. It's accountability. Big difference. I stared at the screen, my hands shaking with anger. I wanted to type 1,000 more things, to unleash all the pent-up rage I'd been holding back. But I knew better. Jessica was looking for any opportunity to paint me as the villain, and I wasn't about to give her the satisfaction. Instead, I took a breath, closed the message thread, and focused on the next move. Around noon, I got a text from Ryan. Ryan, Paul's wife just called me. She's filing for divorce. Wants me to send her the screenshots too. It was a small victory, but it felt like a step in the right direction. Jessica's lies were unraveling faster than she could spin them, and no amount of crocodile tears or legal threats would stop the truth from coming out. By late afternoon, Jessica came home. She stormed through the door, her face a mask of barely contained fury. "Do you think this is a game, Mark?" she snapped, slamming her purse onto the counter. "No," I said evenly, not looking up from my laptop. "But clearly you do." She laughed bitterly, pacing the kitchen like a caged animal. "You've turned everyone against me. Ryan, Paul, even our friends. Do you even care what you've done to me?" I finally looked at her, my expression cold.
What I've done to you?
"Are you seriously still trying to make this about you?" "It is about me," she shouted, her voice breaking. "You've ruined my reputation, my career, everything. For what? Revenge?" "No," I said, standing to face her. "For the truth. For the respect you never gave me. For the life you threw away the second you decided you were too good for this marriage." She stared at me, her chest heaving with rage. "You think you're some kind of hero, don't you? Exposing me, humiliating me. But you're no better than I am." "Maybe not," I admitted, my voice calm. "But at least I can look in the mirror and know I didn't betray the people who trusted me." Jessica's lips curled into a sneer. "You'll regret this, Mark. I'll make sure of it." "Go ahead," I said, stepping closer. "Burn every bridge you have left. See where it gets you." For a moment, she didn't respond. Then she grabbed her purse and stormed out again, slamming the door behind her. As I watched her go, I felt a strange mix of emotions. Anger, sadness, and something I hadn't felt in weeks. Clarity. Jessica had made her choice, and now she was facing the consequences. But for the first time, I realized I didn't care what she did next. This wasn't my burden anymore. It was hers. Jessica's threats didn't scare me. By now, they were predictable, hollow echoes of her crumbling power. But I wasn't naive enough to think she'd stop trying to claw her way back into control. The next morning, I got a call from Ryan. His voice was sharp, almost panicked. "She's trying to flip the narrative," he said. "She's telling people you were the one cheating, that you've been abusive." I froze for a moment, the audacity of her accusations hitting me like a slap. Then a bitter laugh escaped my lips. "Abusive? That's her angle now." Ryan sighed. "Yeah, she called me last night, begging me to back her up. Said if I didn't, she'd tell everyone I forced her into the relationship. Blackmail or something." "Unbelievable," I muttered. Jessica wasn't just desperate. She was reckless, throwing accusations like knives, hoping one would land. "She's losing it, man," Ryan said. "But if she's willing to lie about this, who knows what else she'll try." I clenched my jaw, the familiar anger bubbling back to the surface. "Let her try. I've got more than enough proof to bury her lies." We hung up shortly after, and I spent the next hour gathering everything I had. Texts, emails, the screenshots Ryan had sent me, even a few recorded conversations I'd managed to save during our confrontations. I wasn't planning to go nuclear unless I had to, but if Jessica wanted to play dirty, I'd be ready. By mid-afternoon, the door slammed open, and Jessica walked in. Her hair was disheveled, her makeup smeared. She looked like she hadn't slept, her eyes wild and unfocused. "You've pushed this too far, Mark," she said, her voice trembling with fury. I stayed seated at the dining table, my laptop open in front of me. "You're the one who pushed it too far, Jess. I'm just making sure people see you for who you really are." Her eyes darted to my laptop, then back to me. "What are you doing now? Writing another sob story for our friends? Telling them how poor, innocent Mark was wronged by the big bad wife?" "No," I said, leaning back in my chair. "I'm making sure that when you try to smear me, like you've already started doing, there's a record of the truth." Jessica laughed bitterly, pacing back and forth like a caged animal. "You're pathetic, you know that? Sitting here, playing the victim, acting like this is all my fault." "It is your fault," I said, my voice cold. "You lied, you cheated, and now you're blaming me for exposing it. Grow up, Jess." Her pacing stopped, and she turned to face me, her eyes blazing. "You want to play games, Mark? Fine, let's play. You think people are on your side now, but wait until I tell them what you're really like." "And what am I really like?" I asked, standing to meet her glare. Jessica's lips curled into a sneer.
Controlling.
Insecure. A workaholic who barely paid attention to me.
You're innocent, Mark.
"And once I'm done with you, No one will believe you ever were. Her words stung, but I refused to let her see it. Instead, I stepped closer, my voice steady. Do whatever you want, Jess. Tell whatever story you need to make yourself feel better. But remember this, the truth always comes out. And when it does, you'll be standing alone. Her sneer faltered, just for a moment. Then she grabbed her phone and stormed out again, slamming the door so hard it rattled the windows. As I watched her car speed away, I felt an odd sense of relief. For weeks, I'd been consumed by her lies, her manipulations, her relentless attempts to control the narrative. But now I realized something important. I didn't need to fight her anymore. She was destroying herself. I sat back down at the table, opening my laptop again. The screen displayed my finalized message, one I'd been debating whether to send. It was addressed to a group of close friends and family, detailing everything that had happened. The facts, the evidence, the truth. Nothing vindictive, nothing exaggerated. Just the cold, hard reality of what Jessica had done. My finger hovered over the send button. I wasn't doing this for revenge. I was doing it to clear the air, to protect myself from her lies, and to finally close this chapter of my life. With a deep breath, I clicked send. It was done. The message sent, I sat back in my chair and waited. There was no turning back now. I hadn't just told the truth. I'd handed it to everyone who mattered, all at once. Jessica could spin her lies to a few people, but there was no way she'd outmaneuver the facts I'd laid out. It didn't take long for the responses to start pouring in. Mark, I had no idea. I'm so sorry you've been dealing with this. This must have been so hard for you to share. If you need anything, let me know. Wow. I always thought Jessica was a little intense, but I didn't realize she was capable of something like this. The relief was overwhelming. For the first time in weeks, I felt like I wasn't alone, like people finally understood what I'd been going through. Then came the bombshell. One of Jessica's coworkers, someone I barely knew, messaged me privately. Mark, I'm so sorry you're dealing with this. I thought you should know. Jessica had a reputation at work. You're not the first person she's hurt. I froze, staring at the message. My stomach twisted as I typed out a response. Me? What do you mean? The reply came quickly. There were rumors about her and another manager a couple of years ago, and a client before that. I didn't want to believe them at the time, but seeing your message, it all makes sense now. I didn't know whether to be angry, disgusted, or just numb. Jessica's betrayal wasn't just a one-off mistake or a midlife crisis. It was a pattern, something she'd been doing long before I ever suspected. I was still processing this when Jessica came home. She slammed the door behind her and stormed into the living room, her face flushed with rage. What the hell is wrong with you, Mark? I set my phone down, meeting her glare. What now? Don't play dumb, she spat. You sent that message, didn't you? To everyone. I didn't bother denying it. They deserved to know the truth. The truth? She repeated, her voice rising. You mean your twisted version of it? You're ruining my life, Mark. I stood, my anger finally bubbling to the surface. You ruined your own life, Jessica. You lied, you cheated. And now you're angry because people finally know who you really are. Her hands trembled, but her voice stayed venomous. You think this makes you look good? Airing our dirty laundry like some scorned ex? You're pathetic. I stepped closer, my voice calm but firm. You can call me whatever you want. I don't care anymore. This isn't about you or me. It's about the truth. And the truth is, you've been lying to everyone, not just me. Now they know. Deal with it. Jessica's mask cracked. For the first time, I saw something other than anger in her eyes, fear. You don't understand, she said, her voice softer now. I could lose everything, Mark. My job, my reputation, everything I've worked for. Maybe you should have thought about that before you started tearing everything apart, I said coldly. Her lips parted as if she wanted to argue, but no words came out. Instead, she turned and walked to the door, her shoulders slumping. You'll regret this, she muttered, more to herself than to me, before walking out again. The door closed, and for the first time, I didn't feel the usual knot of tension in my chest. Instead, I felt a strange, unfamiliar calm. Jessica was spiraling, and there was nothing I could do to stop it. But I wasn't responsible for her downfall. She'd lit the fire herself, and now she was choking on the smoke. I picked up my phone again, scrolling through the messages from friends and family. There was one in particular that stood out, a simple text from my sister. "Proud of you for standing up for yourself. Let me know when you're ready to start fresh." For the first time in weeks, I smiled. A real smile. Jessica's chaos no longer defined my life. It was time to start thinking about what came next. The days that followed felt surreal. Jessica's presence in my life was unraveling, thread by thread. She'd come home late every night, avoiding eye contact, her footsteps heavy with defeat. We barely spoke, and when we did, the conversations were brief, bitter exchanges that led nowhere. It was clear that she was losing her grip, not just on me, but on the carefully curated image she'd built for herself. Friends who once believed her excuses were now reaching out to me, apologizing for not seeing the truth sooner. Paul's wife had filed for divorce, and Ryan had cut all ties with Jessica. She was running out of allies, and it was starting to show. Then came the final blow. A knock at the door late one evening startled me. I wasn't expecting anyone, and Jessica wasn't home yet. When I opened it, I found Paul's wife standing there. "I hope I'm not intruding," she said, her tone sharp but polite. "Not at all," I said, stepping aside. "Come in." She didn't waste time. Once we were seated in the living room, she pulled out a folder and set it on the coffee table between us. "I thought you should see this," she said. Inside were copies of emails, invoices, and what looked like a client complaint, all tied to Jessica. As I skimmed through them, the picture became clear. "She's been using her position at work to cover up her affairs," Paul's wife explained. "Booking client meetings that never happened, charging expenses that had nothing to do with work. This isn't just unethical. It's criminal." I stared at the papers, a mix of anger and disbelief swirling inside me. Jessica's betrayal wasn't just personal. She'd put her career, her colleagues, and even her company at risk, all to fuel her selfish desires. "What do you want me to do with this?" I asked. Paul's wife smiled faintly, though there was no humor in it. "I'm already forwarding this to her employer, but I thought you deserved to know before it all comes crashing down." I nodded, my mind racing. This wasn't just the end of our marriage. It was the end of the life Jessica had built on lies. After she left, I sat in the quiet house, staring at the folder. A part of me felt vindicated, but another part just felt tired. Jessica had spent years manipulating and deceiving, and now it was all catching up to her. When Jessica finally came home that night, I was waiting for her. "What now?" she asked, dropping her bag by the door. I held up the folder. Do you know what this is?" Her face paled as she walked closer. She snatched the folder from my hands and flipped through it, her eyes widening with every page. "Where did you get this?" she demanded. "Paul's wife," I said simply. "She's already sent it to your boss." Jessica's hand trembled as she closed the folder. For the first time, she looked genuinely afraid. "Mark, you have to help me. Please." I laughed bitterly, shaking my head. "Help you? After everything you've done?" "I made mistakes," she said, her voice breaking. "But you don't understand, they'll fire me. My career will be over." I stood, staring her down. "And what about everything you destroyed, Jess? Our marriage? The trust one had in you? The life we built together? You didn't care about any of that, but now you want me to save you." Tears welled up in her eyes, but I didn't feel sympathy. "Not anymore. This is your mess," I said firmly. "You clean it up. I'm done." Jessica collapsed onto the couch, her face buried in her hands. For the first time, she didn't have a snarky comeback or a manipulative retort. She was defeated. I walked out of the room, feeling a strange sense of closure. This wasn't the way I wanted things to end, but it was the only way they could. The next morning, I called my lawyer and started the divorce process. It wasn't easy. Untangling our lives, our finances, and our memories was painful. But every step felt like reclaiming a piece of myself, one that Jessica had stolen during the years of lies and betrayal. Weeks later, as I signed the final papers, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't bitter. I was free. Jessica's name was no longer a storm cloud hanging over my life. She'd made her choices, and now she was living with the consequences. As for me, I wasn't looking back. It was time to move forward, time to rebuild, time to live for myself again.